Welcome to the Poetry Exchange. I'm Michael Shaeffer. If you heard our first episode, you'll know that we've been exploring the idea of poems as friends. We've been inviting people to come and talk to us about a poem that's been a friend to them, and in exchange we create a gift for them, a reading of the poem that's been inspired by the conversation in some way. We've created this podcast as a way of sharing these conversations with more people, and with the kind permission of our visitors, we're able to do that. If you want to read the poem as you're listening, you can do so by pressing the little information button within your podcast app. This week's episode was recorded at the Wise Words Festival in Canterbury in September this year at the Greyfriars Chapel. And you'll be hearing about I Am Like a Rose by D.H. Lawrence, the poem that's been a friend to Mary Ann.
Cup of tea is good.
Wonderful, yes.
Mary Ann, I am just so pleased that we've actually got the chance to do this. It's really lovely.
Yes. Nice to have this opportunity, yes.
Yeah. So lovely. Mary Ann, would you mind reading it?
I am like a rose. I am myself at last. Now I achieve my very self. I, with the wonder mellow, full of fine warmth. I issue forth in clear and single me, perfected from my fellow. Here I am all myself. No rosebush heaving its limpid sap to culmination has brought itself more sheer and naked out of the green in stark clear roses than I to myself am brought.
So when did you first come across the poem?
It was comparatively recently. It was probably about 3 or 4 years ago. But I mean, I've always been... D.H. Lawrence has always been one of my favourite authors, mainly for his fiction, and I discovered his poetry later. But this poem I read for the first time, I think, probably, it must be about 3.5 years ago. It coincided with the time when I actually lived on my own for the very first time, which is quite something when you're in your early 50s. And for the very first time in my life, I could be me. And I read this poem and I thought, this poem has been written for me. And it also happens that I've always been very passionate about roses, especially the old roses. I'm fascinated by their history and just everything about it. It spoke to me.
What a wonderful, wonderful thing that this arrived at that moment so perfectly for you with so many connections to it. Where were you when you read it first? Can you remember where you
Yes, I was actually in my flat. As I say, it's the first place that I'd lived on my own. For the first time I could make this space my own space. I could have what I wanted, where I wanted it. It was completely my space, and there was no one to scold me or criticise me for anything I did there. I could just do and say what I wanted. It was my space, and I just stood there and read that poem, and it just shivers, down my spine, because it was just one of those moments where it just seemed so apt. Because I'd previously had these, I'd had the complete poems of D.H. Lawrence before, and ended up having to sell them, but I'd just got the 2 volumes back again, and I was looking through them and I found that poem, so I was just so thrilled. That it just seemed one of those things, if you believe in fate, that it was meant to be. Yeah.
Can I ask, this is sort of off of the poem, really.
Yes, of course.
But, did you find that difficult to kind of almost identify what it was you wanted, having been used always, or for a long time, to having been in a relationship, or was it sort of almost quite quickly just quite liberating, going, I don't have to worry about it?
I think it took me a while to get used to the fact that I didn't have to consider anyone else's opinion before I bought something or did something. But as soon as I did, it was very liberating. It took me quite a while, and all of a sudden I thought, no, if I can afford it, if I want it, I will have it. And I also thought, from now on, if there's anything I really not enjoying or don't want to do, I'm not going to do it. And that was very liberating as well. And because I've always, as I say, my passion for roses, so I regard it almost like my symbol. So at any time where I feel that I'm being pressurised to do something I don't want to do, I almost think I am like a rose, I am a rose. I am this person, I am myself. Because it's taken me a long time to be confident, I suppose, and as soon as I had the confidence to say no and not give in for a quiet life, then that was very liberating. So, and I think all the time, before I was on my own, for a long time I sort of lived in my head the sort of life I'd like to live if I was my own person. So I did have some idea of what I'd like to do, but even so, when it took a while to adjust to the fact that I could actually do that once I was free, yes.
Yeah. I loved what you said about reading it and thinking, well, this has been written for me. I mean, that sort of, really profound kind of connection into a poem, which can happen, but, it's quite rare in a way that you really get that real kind of, as if somehow something happens across history and time and space between that poet and then thinking, no, this is actually just for me, coming to me now, and that must have been a wonderful feeling.
Oh, it was, absolutely. But the strange thing was that in a way I had to separate the poem from the author, because although S.A. Dietzschon's one of my favourite authors, and I've read lots of biographies of him, I don't think he really wasn't a very nice person in many respects, and yet he was able to write this poem. I think he wrote it actually more about himself, because I think although he loved his wife very much, because he was a very passionate person, he felt things very deeply, and unfortunately expressed them in a physical way sometimes towards her in a very negative way. But he had an awful lot to cope with the fact that he'd married. She'd left her marriage to marry him, she'd left her children. Also during the First World War they were alienated because she was German, and he also basically turned his back on his background and his family to pursue his dream as a writer. And I think there was a point in his life where he felt that he felt truly himself. He'd surmounted all these problems, or he felt he had, and I think he was probably writing it at that time, because he's written quite a lot of poems about roses. Most of them are very sensual poems. There's one called Gloire de Dijon, I don't know if you're familiar with that. And it's like he's describing a Renoir painting of a woman drying herself after her bath. This is in here actually, it's a wonderful sensual poem. But this one is different to the others, I feel. And of all the poems he's written about roses, I say this was the one that was my poem. Yeah, absolutely.
It really is your poem.
Oh, it is.
And the timing of it coming into your life, had it come into your life when you were 25 or something, I think maybe you would have connected to it, but not in the profound way that you seem to have with this now.
Yes, I think I would have read it and thought, that's how I'd like to be.
Yeah.
But I read it and I thought, yes, that is how I am now. So the last line of the first stanza, and single me perfected from my fellow, it's an acceptance of you as you are, being different from everyone else. But being different is okay, it's not wrong. It's, you're perfect for being different, for being an individual. It's like an affirmation of that.
Can you tell me what you understand by the my very self, I with the wonder mellow, full of fine warmth?
For me, that it felt as though being able to look at the world anew through the eyes of being just myself, being able to think for myself and enjoy the world just as myself, and not as part of something else, or being able to keep that enjoyment separate because I couldn't share it with anyone else. But I could actually enjoy the world as I wanted to enjoy it and express that. It almost sounds slightly how you feel when you've had a couple of glasses of wine, and you know sometimes it can make you a bit more talkative, and some people don't like that, but when you're on your own, it doesn't matter. You know, you can be like that. It's lovely. You can say do what you want.
So the second stanza, here I am all myself. No rose bush heaving its limpid sap to culmination has brought itself more sheer and naked out of the green in stark clear roses than I to myself am brought.
I think he's saying that of all, well, if he's still using roses as a metaphor, of all the rose bushes, if he's seeing himself as a rose bush, he's saying that his rose bush has produced the most beautiful, clear, and individual roses. That's the way I read it.
Yes.
He's the rose of all roses.
Yes, yeah. That's it. Yes, and they all go through the stage of the sap rising to the buds, and then the buds opening to the roses, and obviously that takes a season to do. You know, roses, like all living things, have their struggles, and everyone goes through their struggles, but he has produced stark clear roses, and whereas others may produce roses that don't fully open or whatever, but in other words, he has gone through it all, and he is him, his clear self.
I mean, it's just brilliant, isn't it? How much is offered up in that simple. Its limpid sap to culmination, heaving its limpid sap to culmination, has immediately, kind of catalysed your use of the word struggle there, which is such a great kind of image of how living things are a symbol to us of what is a daily thing. And
yes.
So I'm interested about your connection to roses. So when did that begin for you, this passion?
But it was through my mother, because she became very passionate about roses, particularly the old roses. And at the time she had quite a large garden, and she gradually started to put together a collection of very old roses, and she was very good at flower arranging as well. So it was just wonderful to have these beautiful things around. And but I've just started to grow them again, because I moved to a flat where I was able to have a garden, and I started to grow roses in pots, and I spent a long time sort of researching the history of them and the types of roses. And if you are interested in roses, it's just an endless source of intrigue and information. And
And do you think when you perhaps particularly when you had your mother's garden, and do you think some of the kind of significance of the rose that is named and expressed here was maybe you were maybe communing with that in some way?
Oh yes, definitely, I think so. Yes, absolutely. Yes, I'm sure of that. Yes, yes.
Sort of in that time of struggle, nurturing these beautiful things that we're trying to grow and struggle.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes, there's definitely a connection there. Yeah.
You know, the basic idea for this project is the idea of a poem that's been a friend to you. What sort of friend would you categorise this poem as?
I would say it's a very close friend, because it is it's like a friend who has so much in common with myself, so as to be almost like a blood relative, if you like, because it's the connection is deeper than just the words, if you like.
I mean, the other thing that's just so interesting about it, and I feel sort of inspired by meeting you and having the time to talk about this poem, is that, of course, as an image, the rose is massively associated with, romance and love and, connection to other and sexual connection and all those things, which, of course, remains and is a gorgeous thing, but it's just so wonderful to have this other kind of celebration of the symbol being to do with, kind of loving yourself, really, I suppose. sort of adopt that symbol that's been sort of located entirely in that kind of couple romantic world, and actually bring it just for you.
I can claim it as my own. Yes.
Yeah, I really like that.
Thanks so much for sharing it with us.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for listening.
I can see Michael running off to his garden centre as soon as we've finished.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yes, good.
I am like a rose. I am myself at last. Now I achieve my very self. I, with the wonder mellow, full of fine warmth, I issue forth in clear and single me, perfected from my fellow. Here I am, all myself. No rosebush, heaving its limpid sap to culmination, has brought itself more sheer and naked out of the green in stark clear roses than I, to myself, am brought.
That was Fiona Bennett with the reading at the end, and it was myself and Fiona talking to Mary Ann. If you enjoyed this week's episode, please tell your friends and press subscribe to make sure you get every episode as it becomes available. There'll be another one along in about a week's time. If you want to find out more about the work we're doing or get in touch with us, you can find us at thepoetryexchange.co.uk. Thank you for listening.